Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of the Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Texas Hill Country Fishing Report with Greg Wielander from Upstream on the Fly. How you doing, Greg?
Hi, Marvin. I'm not too bad. I'm doing good. Fishing has been good, and we'll only get better because we're finishing out March, going into April.
Yeah, I took a look at your weather, and it's warming up. I know you've got a little bit of weather coming through, but things seem to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, they are. This time of year we're always dodging cold fronts, and what I mean by a cold front is, this past week we just had a fairly strong north wind, and that north wind hung around for like up to 4 days. And what that means is, we were experiencing overnight lows in the 40s and daytime highs barely getting into the 60s. And, when you had that wind blowing, it felt chilly. And, with the cooler temperatures, we've even have, some days that, the sun was out and it looked nice, but being out in that water, it was chilly, and some of our water temperatures have dipped back into the lower 50s as a result of those overnight lows and that stronger north wind. However, we're now headed in the opposite direction. We've got the southeast winds, and that's the predominant wind. That's the wind we want to see here in Central Texas, the southeast breeze. That way the fish are happy. And another point is the smaller bodies of water, they cool down quicker, but they also warm up fastest, okay? So keep that in mind when you head out. And, your bigger reservoirs, your bigger lakes they're not going to be affected as much during, that four-day cool down. And those water temperatures were already kind of in the mid-50s to upper 50s because a lot of the bass are actually spawning on some of our bigger lakes here in Central Texas. But on the river side, I've definitely kept my waders available. You always want to make sure this time of year, I can't stress it enough, is to layer up. When an angler shows up and wants to go fishing, it's because the sun's out and it feels nice standing in the parking lot or at the back of your pickup. It'll fool you once you get on the water. So, layer up, have a fleece and a couple layers of shirts so you can always take stuff off. But when you leave all your apparel at home, it's hard to put it on when you're out there on the water. So keep that in mind. But over the last 2 weeks, we've had about an inch and a half of rain, and there's been some more rain forecasted. It's been so dry, here in Central Texas, we've actually been in a drought, and we could use some heavy rain so we can set ourselves up for summer. But on the other side, not having, a lot of rain right now, but all the hill country streams and lakes are crystal clear, and that's positive for catching. Okay. And, we'll see how the weather plays out. I know there's another shot at rain, but, I think last night we had it was about a half inch in my rain gauge, and we had some pea-sized hail and some strong winds. So, have not been on the water since last night's, tornadic. There was even, I guess, some possibilities of some, swirling winds. So, haven't been out on the water since last night.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty normal spring in Central Texas if you're talking about hail and tornadoes.
Marvin, you're 100% on that, man. I mean, it's we're that time of year where it's either feast or famine.
But back to fishing. Yeah. So, I've been hot and heavy on the white bass, okay? The white bass have been good here in Central Texas. And this past week, though, with that stronger north wind, we did have a little bit of I'm going to say a little bit of a slower bite. It was not a fish every cast, and we'd go for a few hours, catching fish pretty regularly, and then having to do a little more scouting to try to find some additional holes where the fish were congregating. And the largemouth bass bite over the last week has been tough, and and that has to do with, a couple things. More so was our north wind. We did have north wind, and the Guadalupe bass aren't as affected as much, but the largemouth definitely have been. And, we did catch a few decent largemouth this last week, and it was really more bycatch, trying to catch white bass. So, most of our local lakes and reservoirs in Central Texas continue to have the white bass run, and they're going up all the tributaries, and you want to continue to fish those deeper pools associated, next to the sandy gravel shoals. And we've got a full moon coming up here on March 28th. So that's important to be aware of, because there'll be this coming week as we work towards 28th. If you look out at night, after it's been dark, you'll start to see, as long as there's no cloud cover, you see a little bit brighter evenings. And that's also one of the triggers the white bass use to start, migrating up from the lake into the river. So I'm going to say we probably got about another 2 weeks of white bass spawning, and then we'll be done. And also we've got the largemouth spawning on some of our reservoirs, like Lake Travis, for example. And so right now they're more worried about having babies than they are about, eating. But as we get into April, it's going to be a lot of hungry fish wanting to eat, because the bass do spawn. And they don't all spawn on the same day, the same week, or even the same weekend. It's generally over about a 2-month period. So there's always fish going on the nest, and there's always fish coming off ready to eat. So that's what makes spring, a lot of fun here in Central Texas, or really anywhere in the United States. But there we go. I can't stress enough about folks that are, I get a lot of texts and Instagram direct messages about the white bass, and the response I'm telling everybody is, the fish are in the same tributaries, and due to the lack of rain on a lot of our tributaries, now that could be changing with some of that rain we had here the other evening, but the fish are still in those tributaries. They're just not up where you normally go and find them. Okay. So you've got to explore, as you go towards the lake for the white bass. And, we're kind of on the 4th week of white bass runs here, and, they all go, different bodies of water have different spawning dates, and as we get later into March, starting April, you'll see the white bass, spawning more out west. That would be like the Llano River. And then as you go up north of Austin, up towards Waco, you've got, tributaries up there that include, the Bosque and the Brazos and all that. So that whole white bass thing goes throughout the whole state of Texas, and it's a timing thing. But yeah, let's, one of the things I can add is the white bass that we've been catching. Some of them are getting just shy of 17 inches. And for a white bass in Central Texas, that's about as big as you'll see. It's definitely not a state record or anything, but it's very close when you catch, white bass that are taping out at 16 3/4 and almost 17 inches. We're also catching a lot of crappie right now. They're doing the same thing. They're kind of in the same locations of our bodies of water up in our tributaries. And, once you catch a crappie, try to put that fly in that same spot again, because it's not uncommon to pull a dozen or so crappie out of that same spot, because they're school fish. They school up, and there's more than one crappie that came out of that hole. So keep that in mind. But like I said earlier, most of our water temperatures on our big lakes are in the upper 50s to low 60s. So that definitely triggered the spawn and our bigger fish. Your bigger females are up shallow, and that's a lifetime fish. A lot of times, they'll especially target it with a fly rod. So those fish will come off those nests and they'll be ready to eat. So the more days in the water right now, the better off you'll be as an angler. They'll be chasing down your fly. So let's talk about tips and techniques and how to be a little bit more positive out in the water and be able to catch some fish. For the white bass, I've talked about it here in the past. Continue to target your deeper pools, that are associated to your sandy and gravel shoals. And if you're not catching fish, start moving to other pools. It's important to keep looking. Don't just give up. And this cool little weather last week did scatter the white bass a little bit. And another thing is to change up your retrieve. Sometimes the white bass are wanting to fly stripped as fast as you can, and you got to keep it moving. And, I'm also starting to see where they want more of a slowdown, more of an erratic strip, with a strip and a pause in between. They'll get finicky like that sometimes. And the one thing I haven't seen, though, is the pickiness on colors, okay? All the standard colors for your white bass clousers are all still working, olive over white, tan over white, chartreuse over white, and even gray over white. So your clear waters, size down, size 8 is my go-to. And then if you're fishing a little more off-colored water, and off-colored would be, say, the Colorado River above Lake Buchanan. A lot of times they'll get a little more off-colored, and that's where you want to use a size 6 clouser, a little bigger one. Or even on the lower Colorado, if you're fishing down there, the fish will stack up down there, downstream of Austin. Because all the bodies of water around here have white bass. So they all do the same thing. They run up the tributaries, no matter if they're already in a tributary or if they're coming out of a reservoir into a tributary. But the most important thing, if you're out there chasing white bass, is to use a sinking line or a sink tip line. And always use a short 3-foot leader. And I always prefer fluorocarbon for my leaders, because it's more dense and it sinks quicker, okay, than, say, a mono, nylon leader. And I'm using, I'd only use 10 and 12 pound fluorocarbon, for at least for my tippet. And a lot of times, since the 3-foot leaders are kind of hard to buy, I think the shortest leader I've ever seen is maybe like 5 foot. So just make your own, just use a 3-foot section of, 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon and put a perfection loop in it, and you're good to go. As far as fly rods, a 5-weight's my favorite, but you can fish a 4-weight, or you can fish up to a 6-weight in your rods for white bass fishing. And over to largemouth, a lot of the largemouth that, we've been catching some nice fish using the small size 8 clousers. Those largemouth are coming in the afternoon. It's not been a morning game, and I think a lot of that is due to, the overnight lows. It's been a little chilly in the evenings, and you don't need to be up there on the water at sunup. But if that's the only time you've got, go for it. But I find that the end of the day is a lot better. So maybe get off work and go make a few casts. We've got daylight savings time in our advantage, so it doesn't get dark. It's going on close to 8 o'clock. I think sunset's somewhere around 7:35, but we've got a little bit of time. But Guadalupes, largemouth, it's they're wanting a little bit of a slower retrieve, keep that fly to the bottom, and crawfish or any bait fish patterns have been putting fish in the boat. So there we have it, Marvin. We're headed to the end of March here in the Texas Hill Country, getting ready for April.
Well, there you go. And, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us or send them to us on our Facebook or Instagram page. If we use your question, I'll send you some articulate fly swag, and we will enter you into a drawing for something cool from Greg at the end of the season. And, Greg, before I let you hop, why don't you let folks know where they can find you so they can book you and fish with you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website. That's upstreamonthefly.com. And then I'm over on social media, both Instagram and Facebook. And once again, that's Upstream on the Fly.
Well, there you go, folks. You owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Greg.
Tight lines.